Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to Copper Jacket TV. So I'm sure a lot of you clicked on this video because, well, you read the title and you thought to yourself, this has got to be clickbait, right? I can assure you it is not clickbait. Thanks to a bill that was already passed and signed by the governor, the state of California is attempting to ban pretty much all handguns come January 1st of 2028. I want to talk to you guys about it today. This video is proud to be sponsored by American Hartford Gold. Listen, if there is one thing that those of us in the firearms community understand, it's that you cannot rely on the government for your protection. Not with your life, and especially not with your wealth. Look, throughout our lifetime, the dominance of the US dollar was unquestioned, but that may be changing. As we face unprecedented inflation, the world's biggest economies are ditching the dollar for the yen. Banks are failing left and right, and the government is discussing a total control of all of your money with the new digital dollar. Don't let your life savings become a casualty of failing corporations or currency wars. Now is the time to call the only precious metal dealer that I trust, American Hartford Gold. They'll show you how to protect your savings and retirement accounts by diversifying your wealth portfolio with physical gold and silver. With the finest products, amazing customer service, and a buyback commitment, American Hartford Gold has a 5-star rating from thousands of reviews and an A+ from the Better Business Bureau. American Hartford Gold supports content like this that is committed to bringing you the truth. Tell them I sent you and they'll give you up to $5,000 of free silver on your first order, so call them now. Click the link in the description or call 866-856-2507. That's 866-856-2507 or text COPPER to 65532. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about what's going on here, because I don't think a lot of people really know that California is sort of working behind the scenes right now on a bill that was already passed and signed by the governor. It's called SB 452, that would essentially ban handguns in California come January 1st of 2028. Now, let me explain real quick. If you live in the state of California, you've probably noticed over the past year or so that there have been a lot of new things that have been added to the California handgun roster, and that is thanks to the fact that the micro-stamping provision of that roster is no longer enforceable due to a case called Boland v. Bonta, which was able to get it enjoined. California didn't appeal that aspect of the roster. Unfortunately, they did appeal and got the magazine disconnect and loaded chamber indicator reinstated. So those are still requirements for the roster, but the micro-stamping isn't, right? So a lot of companies are able to make some quick changes, add those little components, and they're able to apply for the roster and get them on there. And that's why you've been seeing everything new added over the last year, which has been great. I mean, it's still kind of, a neutered option and not what everybody else is allowed to have. It's still completely unconstitutional, and people in California shouldn't have to worry about some government-approved list or roster. But at least for now, thanks to that micro-stamping provision being enjoined, they've been able to get more than they were before. And so we got to kind of take those little wins. Regardless of that, SB 452 is a new microstamp law, again, already signed, already passed and signed by the governor, that looks to implement a much stricter microstamping rule in 2028. So basically what California's trying to do here is they're trying to create a way that they can circumvent the injunction against the microstamping provision of that roster by addressing some of the issues that were brought up by the judge and some of the reasons why he enjoined it in the first place. So let's go ahead and talk about SB 452 and exactly how this whole thing would play out. Because if it plays out the way that California wants and the way that this new law is actually written, it would require every single handgun in the state of California that would be sold there to have microstamping. Now, some of you might be asking, how is this any different from the microstamping requirement that was already on the roster, and how could this be any worse than that was? Well, this is much, much worse, and this would ban just about everything because it is not part of a requirement to get on the roster. This is separate from the roster altogether. This is a separate micro-stamping law that says if it's to be sold in California, it must have micro-stamping, which would eliminate everything currently on the roster. Everything on the roster right now that doesn't have micro-stamping would be gone. Unlike a provision to get on the roster, where everything that's currently on the roster is kind of grandfathered in at least, right? If there's a new micro-stamping provision, those things would still remain there for a while at least. This is a new one that is separate from that, and everything that's on the roster now, if it didn't have micro-stamping, would be removed. The only things that would be allowed to be sold or transferred in California would be things that had the micro-stamping available on them. So again, it's separate from the roster and it would get rid of everything on the roster if it actually went through. Now, I'll explain to you in a second here how this has, again, already been passed and signed, but still actually has a chance of not taking effect. But in the meantime, let's just read it directly from the bill itself. So it says, commencing on January 1st, 2028, if the department has determined that microstamping components, microstamping-enabled semi-automatic firearms, or both microstamping components and microstamping-enabled firearms are available pursuant to subdivision E of section 27532, it shall be unlawful for a firearms dealer licensed pursuant to sections 26700 and 26915 inclusive to sell, offer, for sale, exchange, give, transfer, or deliver any semi-automatic pistol unless the pistol has been certified as a microstamping enabled pistol defined in section 27531. So you can see from that right there, it doesn't matter if it's on the roster or not. If it doesn't have that microstamping technology on it, then it's not going to be able to be transferred. And so now let's talk about why we still have a chance for this not to be implemented. Now, again, in my opinion, this is where California is trying to circumvent the previous injunction that was placed on the microstamping requirement of the roster, where it says here in Section 2, on or before March 21st, 2025, the Department of Justice shall engage in an investigation to determine the technological viability of microstamping components producing microstamps on spent cartridge casing discharged by a firearm into which the microstamping component has been installed. The investigation shall include input from the relevant stakeholders. If the department has determined that microstamping components are technologically viable pursuant to subdivision A, the department shall on or before September 1st, 2025, provide written guidance on performance standings for persons, associations, partnerships, corporations, or other entities engaged in the business of producing microstamping components. If the department has determined that microstamping components are technologically viable pursuant to subdivision A, the department shall on or before January 1st, 2026, commence accepting applications for licensure of persons, associations, partnerships, corporations, or other entities to engage in the business of producing microstamped components that meet the performance standards. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to set up a timeline of dates where they can somehow justify the viability of microstamping and its commercial availability prior to this law taking effect. So they're trying to find a way to say that, look, it's commercially available, people are making these components, and so this law can take effect. And they're also trying to determine whether or not it is affordable, because that's one of the things that the judge mentioned when he enjoined the microstamping provision of the roster. So we have another date here where it says, if the department has determined that microstamping components are technologically viable pursuant to subdivision A, the department shall on or before July 1st, 2027 determine if either or both of the following is true. Number one, microstamping components at commercially reasonable prices are available from licensees operating pursuant to subdivision C or subdivision D. 2, options of microstamping enabled firearms are readily available for purchase in the state of California. So obviously there's a lot of dates and a lot of things that need to happen between now and January 1st of 2028 for this to be able to take effect. But at least you guys now know that they're actually working right now behind the scenes to try and make this a viable option. I mean, the first date's coming up March 2025. That's when they're going to begin their research. And then if by July 1st of 2027 they actually have a commercially available, viable option, then that would be the only option available in California. But that's pretty much all they need for this to take effect. Will this actually take effect? I don't know. That's going to be really difficult to answer. In my own personal opinion, I don't see a way for this to actually work out. Because one, it's not commercially available now, at least at the time being. It's not commercially available. Also, at the time being, it's just not a viable option. I don't see it being something that can be a viable option in the future either. So will their research actually pan out into anything that makes that July 1st a date, really a date that we need to be paying attention to in 2027? I don't think so personally. It's completely unconstitutional. We all know that. There's no historical tradition of firearms regulation that has anything to do with any type of microstamping or trying to, find casings traceable. There's nothing like that. So would it be overturned? Yeah, I think it would be overturned. But California doing what they do would try and tie this up in court for as long as possible And as you've seen, just like with Duncan, I mean, you could be looking at the better part of a decade before you ever got relief, and they would enforce it. So it's still something that we need to avoid. So again, I wanted to bring this to you and not let it just go by the wayside, and then all of a sudden July 1st hits and hey, they have an option and nobody's been talking about it. So I wanted to share that with you. I want to thank you all very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you guys want more information, I'll link it down below. You guys have a great one.